and there's a valve failure, and nothing works, and you think you're going to die. But he said, what defines people is what you choose to do with what life has given you. So when we think about our learning community, are we going to focus on all the problems that we have? Or are we going to take a bold step forward and to see how we can come up with solutions for each other? So this is perhaps the message that I would like to leave you with. Go back to school. Think of everything that you've heard over these past 2 days and think of what kind of difference you can make together for your school, your students, your parents, and most of all, or just as importantly, for yourselves. Because that is what will keep your fire burning, and that's what will keep you teaching with passion and a heart. And this is it, really.
I think questions are coming. Hello, thank you very much for staying to this last session. I feel a heavy weight of responsibility being the single thorn among these 5 roses on the stage. Nonetheless, I'll do my best. But as I was sitting thinking that, I realised that the idea of competition is perhaps too masculine an idea, so we should think more about community and cooperation and not differences between us. But on that note, you'll remember the slide that Elizabeth put up to start with about the theme of this colloquium. And the idea was about community and talking about community. And it mentioned Vygotsky. And some of you will know that the work of Vygotsky, the research work of Vygotsky, was very much focusing on how young children learn and how they develop ideas about the world, and also how they develop language. And one of the key elements of Vygotsky's ideas, which is probably the one for which he's most famous, is that children don't just learn to become part of a community on their own, in isolation from their native intelligence. They learn to become part of a community by watching and cooperating and mixing with that community socially. In other words, learning is not something we do because we have an innate intelligence and ability to learn only. We use that, but also we cooperate and we learn in conjunction with other people, by watching other people, by observing them, by being corrected by them. So the community as a whole is a very important element in the learning process. And I think the reason why his thinking has become so important in recent years is that people realise how true that is and how important that is, this sense of community. Do you know community, where does the word community come from in linguistic terms? Latin, yeah? And the first bit of it, co, is from the Latin cum, meaning with. The idea that you're learning with, you're conferring with, you're cooperating with other people. This is a very important element in community, that we are all together. If you like, no man is an island, no woman is an island, to quote from John Donne, the poet and the sermon of John Donne. So no one is an island. We are all joined together in a community, and that's a really crucial thing to realise when we're thinking about learning and how people learn, how they learn languages. Now, by contrast, traditional approaches to assessment have emphasised exactly the opposite. The idea is that assessment is something secret and hidden away, like we lock away the exam papers and nobody can see them. I remember when I was teaching in Sudan many years ago, we did our exams on one of those old machines that you turn. We had to do, the secretary had to type them up on a stencil. Maybe some of the older ones here will remember those old days. Type them up on a stencil, put them on a great big machine, and turn the machine once for every sheet that would come off. Does anyone remember that? Or am I simply the oldest person here? Yeah, okay. No. Oh, okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Blue is supposed to be relaxing, maybe. So the idea being that the secretary in that school in Sudan was locked away in her office while she typed up the stencil, and then very secretly all the papers were locked away in the headmaster's office with an armed guard. They sent a soldier to guard the exam papers away. Now, of course, we understand the reason for security, and there's no problem with that, but it does seem to emphasize the fact that assessment is to be something secret, hidden away from everybody, exactly the opposite of the idea of community. If community is everybody sharing, and assessment is secret and locked away, there's an opposition there, isn't there? Now, one of the things I was trying to say in my talk yesterday is how we can break down this idea of assessment as something secret, hidden away, and excluded from everybody. And you remember the acronym that I offered to you yesterday as a way of remembering some of the key things that we should try to do. The acronym was VOICES, but I told you there'd be a test, so finally, can you remember what VOICES stands for? What's the V?
Variety.
So variety, in other words, don't do the same thing all the time. Try and think of different ways of assessing. What about the O?
Ongoing.
Ongoing. It must be a constant thing. Constant, almost minute by minute, the teacher must be thinking, assessing, watching what's going on, and so on. What about the I? Integrated, particularly very important if you're teaching in a school system, integrated with the syllabus that you're expected to be teaching. Because otherwise you'll get in trouble. The parents will be annoyed with you that you're not teaching the syllabus, you're not following the course book. There's an element of integration there. What about the C? Collaboration or cooperation. And that particularly, the word cooperation begins with co, like community, working with other people. So this is perhaps the most important thing to emphasize in today's colloquium, this sense of where assessment is being part of a group and a community, not the king or queen teacher in his or her own class with the door shut, but linking with other teachers, linking with students, with parents, the community outside. So that's a very important element of the VOICES model. What about the E?
Evidence.
Evidence. Yes, we must evidence the assessment for ourselves and for outside stakeholders. And finally, we must remember it's not voice. It's not just the teacher's voice, it's voices. A lot of voices. What does the S refer to?
Systematic.
Yeah, systematic. So although maybe we've been doing this before, this kind of assessment, and we've been doing it as best as we can always be more systematic and more organized and more planned. So when you begin the next semester of work, think ahead and think, how can I actually assess these things better than I've been doing it so far? And that's part of being systematic, and that's part of the VOICES model. Now let me just conclude my part by recalling three things. Two of them were questions which were put to me in the workshop I had earlier today, which made me think a little bit. Remember that the word conference also begins with co, like collaboration, cooperation, community. A conference is a wonderful place for us all together to discuss and learn. And I'm very grateful to the organisers for giving me a wonderful opportunity to come. I think I've learned a lot more from it than I've given. So thank you very much. My intellectual bank is in profit. And one reason for that is just the chance to talk to people who come up to me and say things, or in a formal workshop or questions that you give. And just let me tell you two of the questions that people put in the workshop this morning which made me think. The first one was this, who should we blame if our learners fail? Now, I think we agreed even with the questioner, and the questioner was maybe trying to push a little bit. I don't think blame is necessarily the right word, but we discussed this morning in the workshop, and people said, well, let's not think about blame, let's think about where does the responsibility come from in terms of failure? Well, obviously, it's not the learner alone, it's not the teacher alone, it's a community thing, isn't it? Including the Ministry of Education, the course book writer. There are a whole host of factors why somebody might fail. But I wanted to turn the question on its head and say, what can we do about it? And for me, the teacher has a very important role in that process. Even one teacher alone can do a lot, even if everything else is against that situation. So even if the textbook is rubbish, the ministry is unsupported, the headmaster is horrible, all of those things, a good, inspiring teacher can still do a lot by being motivated, by being enthusiastic. And I hope that all of you, like me, will go away from this conference motivated and enthused to try different things. In my case, in terms of assessment, but also in other things we've learned about in the conference today. A second question that somebody put is, how can you do this in a class of 500? Now that poor woman had a class of 500 students, which for me is a huge number. Now, of course, we cannot do everything in a class of 500. It's impossible. It's just too difficult, but we can still do something. And then I would say for that teacher, that Meskina teacher had 500 people, I would say, okay, you've got a tough job, but the very fact that you're here in this conference, asking the question and hoping for some kind of answer and feedback is half the way there, because it means you're trying to work out and think of the best way of doing things. If instead of coming to this conference you just stayed at home and stuck your head under the bed covers and didn't come out, okay, that would not be a solution. But the very fact that you are here, and she is here, shows a will and a determination which for me leads to a positive outcome of some sort. And the final thing I was reminded of was actually my own experience a few weeks ago when I went to my son's parents' evening at his school. And I apologise if you heard me say this in the workshop this morning, but the workshop reminded me of this case. So I went along to the school and I was there talking to my son's teachers, particularly his geography teacher. And he likes geography, but he didn't do very well in his recent exams, so he's a bit upset. And she gave us 10 minutes of conversation to him and to me, my son and to me. And it was so inspiring what she did. She talked to him about how he could do better in his next test. At the same time, she was talking to me. She was doing two things at the same time. And at the end of it, I came away thinking, what a fantastic teacher. Not only has she managed to show me something about the assessment of geography, she's also helped my son at the same time to boost his confidence, to see ways to go forward. And that for me is a really good example of community. That teacher is not thinking, this is a stupid parents' evening, I'm wasting my time, I'll just say something and hope that the parents go away. No, she's saying this parents' evening is part of the interaction and the community of learning. I'm going to talk to that boy and to that father and build them both into the process. So I go away from that school saying to myself, what a fantastic teacher, what a fantastic school. I can support my son, I can support the school, and we become a community of learning to everybody's benefit. Rather than me going to a headmaster at the end of the term and saying, why did my son do badly in geography? I'll say, right, okay, he didn't do so well, but I'm really happy that that teacher was there. And that for me was an inspiring moment about how teachers can build communities of learning through sheer effort, will, engagement, trying their best to do so. And I hope we can take those messages away with us as we go away from the conference today. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much for this very interesting forum. I think it's a very beneficial panel. I've learned a lot from it, and I guess I'm maybe a minority of the only person who is not specialized in assessment. No. But as an educator, as a teacher trainer, as somebody who has been in the teaching field since I graduated many years ago, I've been involved in assessment of students, of my teaching ability, of my co-teachers' performance in the class, and in our different performances in the teaching, we think of the communities that we work with. One such community is the community of teachers teaching the same subject and working together, collaborating together on teaching. As you go back to your schools, you'll be joining the other community that you belong to, leaving the conference attendee and participant community and going back to the teachers community there. And our duty that we owe that community is to transfer to them and import to them some of the things that we've learned here, because that's a duty we owe that community. To the community of teachers, we learn from each other. It's amazing how many things I've learned from my co-teachers, the teachers who teach in the same team, the different classes that teach the same subject, more or less. So we discuss things together, and amazingly, we learn from each other. We think everybody thinks they're an island on their own. And from the individualistic trend of wanting to have your own material for yourself because you want to prove that you're an efficient teacher, that you're the best teacher, and that you don't want to share your material, otherwise people will do a better job. From this, the mindset that we have where I teach is one of sharing, one of learning from each other, and one of sharing the same material so that we can compile a bank of material, of exercises, of questions that we can share together with our students. How we learn from each other, and I'm sure this is what you're doing here. I'm sure all of you will be going back to your schools or your teaching institutions to share with the community of teachers that you have there, and to share the ideas, to share the insights, and the reward of sharing is that other people will be sharing with you. So this way we get synergy, we become better individuals and better teams and stronger schools and stronger places of education, rather than each individual being stronger than the others but not so strong at the end of the day. So this way we all become a stronger place of work. To the community of students that we teach and we assess, we need to think and what we think of our students where I teach at Cairo University is how they collaborate together. Again, this culture of every student wanting to hide, and that's a common side of different students, hiding their answer sheet, hiding their material so that they can be the outstanding student who knows everything and the best one who can get to the peak of the mountain. That culture is changing now with all the social media and all the students that are sharing. And now it's very nice to see students now sharing things together, sharing material, sharing assignments, and now it was the students who suggested that they share oral presentations, part of our assessment scheme, which is moving away from the traditional 100% of the mark for the final exam to a good amount of the mark, 25% now, and we're moving to 50% in the future of the mark being for continual assessment. Part of that assessment, the part for oral performance of the students, is as suggested by our students for group presentations. What they do is take one of the elements of the syllabus, and each session has a different topic. So at the beginning of the course, while we're giving them the course description, while we're giving them the course description and dividing the topics over the different sessions, what we do is assign each group a topic to present on. In large classes, and you were talking about large classes and how people have to deal with them, in large classes, we divide the students into groups, and each group is responsible for one topic that they prepare a presentation on. Of course, the question comes, if it's a group presentation, how can you make sure that everybody participates? How can you give the mark to every individual student? So, what do we do about that? What we do about that is there is a task for every group, but every individual of the group has a particular task there. And when they collaborate together, of course, the strong helps the weak learns from the strong, everybody's confidence is boosted, and they learn from each other. And at the end of the day, everyone is accountable for what they have done, but as a group, they have helped each other out, and they have all learned from each other. This way, the oral component doesn't have to take so long in the participation. They get the opportunity to prepare at home, and they work together, which makes our creative community team. So they work as a group, and you can give each of them a mark. In this way, we're also trying to make a slight change to the way we assess them, because we're assessing all the different intended learning outcomes. At the beginning of the course, we have certain goals of the course, and we want them by the end of the course to have mastered mastered all these or to have worked and achieved on all the different learning outcomes. So with each session addressing one of those learning outcomes, we make sure that at least one group will have achieved that learning outcome. And every time there's a review, sometimes a quiz, but every time there's a way to assess the students. So it can be in the written form or oral form, but for every session there is some task for them to perform on, and this way we make sure that we assess that particular learning outcome, so that by the end of the term, we have assessed all the different learning outcomes. Again, focus is shifting from the students and the teachers focus on the content. Have the students master the content? Do they remember what we've taught? Rather than that, can they perform on similar but not identical tasks? Can they do something that addresses the same intended goal but something they haven't seen? So that have they developed the skill rather than memorize the content? So this is very essential to assessment. And again, we can help each other out because we ask them to work in groups, at least on some of the tasks. So we help each other out, and the weaker learn from the stronger, the shy can try with the group and learn from them and gain confidence while they are preparing together. So this idea of working in communities, in small communities, helps them when they come to perform in front of the rest of the class. The tasks differ from one session to another, and with this diversity, they are exposed to different performances by different students. By the end of the course, we give them something that would be considered a quiz, but at the same time it gives them the flavor of the final exam. So that it's not really like the whole exam, but it's something that they can try on, and this way they are getting the flavor of the final exam and getting another mark for the assessment. Finally, at least in my classes, I like to give the students a bonus activity for their assessment. And the bonus activity is usually something extracurricular, something additional to the course. So, one of the bonus activities I assign my students is to report on a conference, on a presentation they attended, on a book review that they attended. And they do that, and they get, out of the 100 marks, they get 1 mark. Some of them are finding here. Yes, they get 1 mark for that. But the 1 mark can help a lot, and I don't feel very guilty. That's going to spoil the fairness to everybody else. So those who put the extra mile and do something extra there are given a bonus. They are given a motivator, and sometimes I invite them if there are some. If we have the time, I ask them to report on what they have done. So, and they write reports on it. Another bonus that I like to do often, actually it's not a bonus, it's part of the course, is to have them keep a diary of their learning. Anything that strikes them as something inspiring, whether it's positive or negative about the course. And sometimes it could be negative. They didn't like something, and they write their comments on it and how they would like to do it differently. Or something they really liked that inspired them and made them think in a different way and perform in a different way. Whether in this class or in another class. I don't collect the diaries, which is a mistake. Maybe I should collect them to make sure that they keep them and they don't fall out of the habit of writing in the diary. But at the end of the course, I ask them to write a reflective essay based on their diary. And I ask them to pick out 3 inspiring moments and write them in a reflective essay. And that has a percentage, a small percentage of the mark. Not 1, no, 3 or 4. So I give them, and they know up front that they eventually have to write a reflective essay. And it's something informal, and I want to see what has touched them, to go back to the love and the emotions and how they can relate to the course. And usually it's something positive, because that's where they can vent their feelings and how they interacted with the course, with different courses, and I asked them to write the comments anonymously. I don't want to know about different teachers and what they do. I want to know about what it is that affected them and that influenced their learning. So, as communities, of course, they share the material, they share the ideas, they work in groups, and sometimes they share some of those inspiring moments. And I guess that's about it with my experience as a teacher, as part of the community of teachers where I work, and of course, to pay back my due to the community, I'll have to report on what I've learned here from all my colleagues. Thank you very much.
I have this most difficult task to be a discussant. I'm not quite sure what a discussant means, but I'll do my best. I want to start with where Ola left off, because I don't know, Stephen, Vanessa, and Leslie, you realize what Ola just described is quite dramatic. It's a huge breakthrough in a very, very rigid and traditional system at a national state university. I know very well, I teach part-time there, and it is really hard for me. So what Dr. Ola is describing is an amazing change in what's happening. So I just want you to, 3 international guests, to realize that this is enormous, what you've just described. It is still very much grade-oriented. And so, Stephen, when you talk about the co, and I love that when you're analyzing the word community, well, there is co, it comes in competition. And we're still not in the community part. And what I love what Ola said regarding that all of us here as a community, we are a community of teachers, we owe it, when we go back to our universities and schools and centers, to our other community where we are to share. And this idea of multiple communities is wonderful, because